All right, so let's start this broadcast with the big story that we are tracking on WION at this hour. The American Secretary of State Antony Blinken at this moment is speaking live during his visit to Beijing. Let's listen to what's being said there.
But the other important thing is it's not just us. This is a concern that I've heard around the world, and notably from European partners, and this came up in conversations just a week ago when we had a meeting of the G7. So this is not about containing China. It's not about cutting off trade or investment. Again, as you heard Secretary Yellen say, this is important to us and to many other countries around the world. But we want to ensure that it proceeds fairly and in a way that doesn't have these unfair effects on our industries, on our workers, and on our companies. And again, that's something that's shared across the world. When it comes to China's support for Russia's defense industrial base, all I can tell you is I was extremely clear about our concerns in some detail, but we'll have to see what actions follow from that. Now, I think China has demonstrated in the past when it comes to Russia and Ukraine that it can take positive action. You'll recall that well over a year ago, we had concerns that Russia was considering the possible use of a nuclear weapon. And I believe that China's voice was important in, at least at that time, moving Russia away from that possible course of action. But now it is absolutely critical that the support that it's providing, not in terms of weapons, but components for the defense industrial base, again, things like machine tools, microelectronics, where it is overwhelmingly the #1 supplier to Russia, that's having a material effect in Ukraine and against Ukraine, but it's also having a material effect in creating a growing threat that Russia poses to countries in Europe, and something that has captured their attention in a very intense way. And as I said, TikTok did not come up. Thanks.
For the next question, Wong Lu with the paper.
Thank you, Secretary. I'm Wang Lu from the paper. We observed intensive interaction between China and U.S. at various levels since the USA summit last November, as well as intensive interactions with Chinese officials and people during your visit. With the U.S. election agenda gradually dominating American politics, there is the need for various parties to demonstrate their strong stance on China to secure votes, leading to negative sentiments and action regarding China. So in this context, how can we safeguard and effectively implement the achievements made by both sides during this period? Also, minimizing the influence of campaign-style rhetoric and fostering more goodwill to stabilize Sino-U.S. relations. Thank you.
Thank you. In my job, I don't do politics. I focus on policies, and that's what I've been doing here. At President Biden's instruction, trying to carry forward the agenda and the agreements that were reached between President Biden and President Xi in California at the end of last year. And that's where my focus is, and that's where it will remain in the months ahead. And as I said a few moments ago, we've seen important progress on that agenda in the time since the meeting between the two presidents, including on counter-narcotics, including on military-to-military ties, communications, including now on the dialogue that we've just announced on artificial intelligence, as well as on people-to-people exchanges and connections between our countries. Also, vitally important, coming out of the California meetings, as President Biden made clear, that we continue to communicate clearly about our differences, at the very least to minimize the chance of miscalculation, misunderstandings. And that's also exactly what I did on this visit and will continue to do. And that's simply what's required, which is to continue to advance our interests and our values, which has nothing to do with election cycles and everything to do with what's important to the American people.
Simon Lewis with Reuters. Hi, thank you. Mr. Secretary, you mentioned that you think
that China can play a more constructive role, in global crises, particularly talking about the Middle East. You had a conversation with Minister Wang Yi earlier this month, around the time of when Iran-Israel tensions were really ramping up. I wonder if you have an assessment of the role that China has played, and whether it's sufficient in the actions that the Chinese government has taken so far. And there's some reports that the Palestinian groups Fatah and Hamas had a meeting here in Beijing while you were here. I wonder if that's an area where you would welcome some Chinese involvement. And while we're on the Middle East, I think we can't ignore some of the images that have been coming out from back in the US from university campuses. It's quite striking to see, students, some of the violence in these protests, but students all across your country are coming out and expressing their outrage at what's happening in Gaza. Are you taking on board those protests? What do you say to young people, young Americans who, see this as a moment when they need to speak out against their government?
Thanks. So first on the Middle East, I think I've talked to the Foreign Minister, Wang Yi, at least half a dozen times on this since October 7th, including, of course, today, but also in previous meetings we had, phone conversations, etc. And yes, I think this is an area where China can use the relationships it has, the influence it has, to try, for example, to prevent the conflict from escalating, from spreading. And we had a good conversation when tensions were particularly acute, preceding and then immediately following Iran's unprecedented attack on Israel 10 days or so ago. And I think the relationships, again, that China has can be positive in trying to calm tensions, prevent escalation, avoid the spread of the conflict. And we agreed that we'd remain in regular touch on this, and that's certainly my intention. I'm not aware of the meeting you referred to. I think you said between Fatah and Hamas, so nothing to say on that. In terms of the protests back home, look, again, it's not my practice to comment on domestic matters, but look, people have strong, passionate feelings about what's happening in Gaza and in the Middle East that I very much understand. And when we see the horrific human suffering and the death of children, women and men who are caught in this crossfire of Hamas is making, it's gut-wrenching, as I've said before. And we want to do everything we can to bring it to an end. And in our own country, it's a hallmark of our democracy that our citizens make known their views, their concerns, their anger at any given time. And I think that reflects the strength of the country, the strength of democracy. Now, as I've also said before, this could be over tomorrow. It could have been over yesterday. It could have been over months ago. If Hamas had put down its weapons, stopped hiding behind civilians, released the hostages, and surrendered.
All right, so that is the American Secretary of State in Beijing talking on a whole host of different issues, where he also was asked questions on what is his take on the protests that are taking place in American universities with the issue of the war in the Gaza Strip. And this, of course, had been his response. For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.